mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, welcome everybody back to I Mix What I Like. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Please do all the things, like, share, subscribe, and all that kind of good stuff. And come on in, put this in your socials, let folks know that you are here and that we are in fact live, and have a great show. A very exciting show, something I've been looking forward to for a long time. And before I do bring our guest up, I did just want to put out there just a quick thanks to everybody who came out over these last 2 nights to see Crushing Wheelchairs in Baltimore and DC. If you are a channel member or a patron, you can get a first look at the DC screening Q&A discussion from last night at your convenience, and please do check it out. And everyone else will get to see have access to that in, I don't know, a day or two, I don't know, soon. But it was just a great couple of runs. Got to see some folks that we usually only see on screen, and I'm very much honored to have met a number of people who appreciate the work we do here and on Black Liberation Media, and who just were out showing love and support. And again, please do check the Q&A discussion from last night, which was great. And then when you get a chance, see the film, support the film. We absolutely have to support third cinema and grassroots media that like this, and we definitely have to support the politics and the movements that will make such media unnecessary, or maybe at most a reflection of a history long gone and overcome. So again, just salute to everybody. Big thanks for coming out, and please, others of you, check out the film. And thanks again in advance. And with that, I want to move to bring up our guest, because among many other things, she has written about this issue, and in fact, I'm hoping we could even start there. So Chitimacha, welcome to the platform. It is great to see you again in person, sort of, or as virtually, at least, outside of the chat, the undefeated chat. You are a chat all-star. And if I can, before you say anything, I just want to thank you sort of in person directly for all of the support you show this platform and Black Liberation Media and all of the you're everywhere. You seem to be supporting everybody. You're in everybody's chat and doing great work. So thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you. Greetings. Good morning. And yeah, you got to unmute. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Happy to be here. Yeah, just happy to support the platforms and and whatnot that I am there, because I keep trying to work on that, reversing that propaganda that people around me have, and so sharing as much as I can. So it's not me talking to the void all the time. It's like, okay, look, watch this, and so trying.
Well,
I'm trying.
No, I mean, I just appreciate it. I see it all the time and am grateful for it, and would encourage others to follow your lead in being so supportive of all this work. Speaking of which, and I owe him, I'm going to apologize to him again, because Lateef showed up last night, and I'm so used to seeing this picture here and having only met him once in person that I initially didn't even, I recognized him as somebody I'm sure I've met and appreciated, but I didn't put the pieces together. So I had to overcome a moment of embarrassment, and I appreciate Lateef being gracious in that moment. But it was good to see you last night, and others. Thank you very much for coming out and for being here, and all the love you show these spaces. But it was yeah. But it was a reminder, something that I thought of when I saw you on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism a couple weeks ago. And I just had another one of those moments where it's like, you know, it's we don't know each other that well, and we see each other in these spaces, but I don't always, certainly with my memory, I don't always put pieces together. So I'm like, I see that I've seen your work before, but didn't realize who I didn't know. And then when it all started coming together, I was like, hold up. I'm saying, so she's gonna be in the chat all the time. She's doing interviews, you know. So now I'm going to intentionally say that I want to cover, there's going to be some overlap, but I think I'm covering some ground that was not covered on millennials intentionally, because I do think Jared does really phenomenal interviews, and there's no need in trying to duplicate that. So I would rather have people watch that, and then in addition, you know, enjoy this conversation. There's one piece we are going to have to come back to, though, and talk fully. But if you would, let me just start. If you would just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I'll encourage people to check the show description if they're not already familiar with your link tree to find out even more. But if you could just give us a quick summary, overview.
Okay. Well, my name is Terri Chitimacha in the chat, and I think I explained on millennials, but I feel like I want to explain here my screen name, since like really thinking of, you know, Red Nation, shouts out, Nick Estes, Kim Tallbear, talking about pretendians. And so I was
Great
born and raised
episode.
on Stolen. Yeah, that was great. It was I was just, didn't realize it was to that extent that
I
that
know,
was
right? The
happening.
pretendian thing is crazy.
That was, yeah, it was crazy. And so I label myself Chitimacha in the chat because I'm born and raised on stolen Chitimacha land, which is all of Southeast Louisiana, inclusive of New Orleans. One thing I will add, there is an indigenous name for this area, Balbancha, but it's a Choctaw word, and this is not Choctaw land, although there is a band of Choctaw here in New Orleans and in Jena, Louisiana. But the Choctaw, when the French arrived, a faction of their leadership are the Choctaw to the Chitimacha are analogous as the Gulf states Arab leaderships to the Palestinians.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, because
Wait,
that
say that
first
again. The Choctaw and it's Chitimacha. Say it again. I've been saying it wrong. So I just like the other Jared was saying.
I'm saying Chitimacha.
Chitimacha.
I believe
Okay.
that's the right, like
Okay.
the French spelled it Sitimaxa or something like that. But Chitimacha
Mm.
is what I how I pronounce it. That could be wrong, but
And you're
the
saying they were to the Choctaw or vice versa. Say that
Choctaw,
again. Say.
no, the Choctaw to the Chitimacha
Mm.
are analogous as the Gulf states Arabs to the Palestinians. So by this naming of Balbancha being an indigenous name for it, I don't use that, which is why I'm Chitimacha in the chat, because this is not Choctaw land. And the first 10 years, I'm going off on a tangent. Please feel free to stop me. The first 10 years that the French were here, the Chitimacha were chattel slaves. And they were also trafficked to the Caribbean. And it was the Choctaw who made that happen, or a faction of the leadership. And just like the Choctaw eventually found out, like the Gulf states Arabs are finding out in real time in dealing with the European invaders, thank you for your help in decimating your brethren, the Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, et al. But we'll be taking your land now too. So I like to say a roundabout story because it was just a way for me to rep New Orleans on the internet without using the settler name. So yeah, that's why I'm Chitimacha in the chat. I know that was a
Right
lot.
on. No, that's perfect. I appreciate it, and definitely needed that, and don't know much about that history, and wasn't even aware until that millennials interview that you are from that area, New Orleans, as I heard
New
you just say,
Orleans.
New Orleans. So right on. Yeah. And I appreciate that. But as I said, I do want to start. Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was gonna say the other thing about me is like I've worked with students for the last 20, 30 years. So I guess that's like my background of who I am. I worked with students in college access, both in San Francisco and then returning here to New Orleans. So
Okay. All right. Right on. And then, but you're also a writer, and
Yeah.
and the one piece that I do want to duplicate from millennials is an appreciation for your ability to be brief and uh, but bring many levels of clarity and depth to the work. And that story you told, that he told, of the river runs through it film and the training that the father gave the kids, that you seem to exemplify in that film, where they were assigned to write something, and then he would say, now cut it in half, and then they would resubmit, and he would say, now cut it in half, and then they, and it reminded me of training that we would get from the late Damu Smith in terms of media work, where he would say, what is, in fact, he would use, what is the Black Voices for Peace line on Palestine? Give it in 60 seconds. Then he would say, give it in 30 seconds. Then he would say, give it in 10 and give it in 3. If you're, on the street and a reporter puts a mic in your face, what would you, And so I appreciate that. But one of the pieces, the work I had just been doing in support of crushing wheelchairs is something you wrote almost a year ago in Black Agenda Report, Unhoused, Why? It's always about the land. And I really appreciated how you not only talked about what was happening here in the US, but you connected it to what is happening in Palestine, and then to a long history of imperialism and colonial theft, including of First Nations peoples' land as well. So I don't know if you would want to talk specifically about this piece, or maybe use this as a I don't know, as an example of your approach to your political writing. But I just thought we could maybe just start here with this issue, and maybe what you were intending to do with it and how you frame it, and just to get us started here.
Okay. I'll repeat a little bit of what I talked about on millennials, and go into it a little bit more in depth. But it was when the genocide started in Gaza. Somebody at some point, after like so much destruction had been wrought, like buildings leveled, hospitals, schools, like literally everything flattened to the ground. There was an image that someone posted of before and after. Like it was literally October 6th. Posted an image of what Gaza looked like, and then what it looked like then. And it was, my first thought was like, oh, it's a land clearing. And thinking about the violence of how land is acquired, the violence of primitive accumulation. And it made me immediately think of that piece where that portion where Marx talks about the Duchess of Sutherland, and how over the course of like 6 years, displacing 15,000 people because she wanted a sheep farm. And thinking about like that practice of the violence was created and perfected internally in Europe, which is why when during colonialism, you see such continuity of the methods of killing people and displacing people from land. And so taking it back like that further is just like making me think, like, a lot of times people, we don't think of, why are we paying rent? Why are we on land having to pay someone else? And who is it that we're paying? Because we're not paying the state. Like if you have a mortgage, you're paying a private bank. So even that's like a grift of ownership, because you have, as a property owner, as the, you own your house, anything goes wrong, like you have the responsibility to pay to get a plumber or whatever it is that's needed, but then you don't actually own it, because if you miss a payment, like it's the banks, it's the private bank. And it kind of also made me think of, even when you think about the way clearings were done here, like I think of New Orleans, and just like a post Katrina New Orleans, and there was a portion we call New Orleans East. Like right now, it's a very Black area. I remember when it was lily white. Um, and that even about a third of the city lives there, but then the land was acquired by like Clint Murchison, who's from Texas. I think he owns like or owned the Dallas Cowboys or something like that, like money from Texas. But then how did you come to be in possession of land to develop it and break it up and then sell it to people for profit? Like, how did you get that land? And so it's always thinking about like the position of land and the violence of the process. So the direct violence of like, okay, if you live on it and we want it, we just gonna kill you. And if you won't go, like it's like what they did in Lebanon. Like, oh, telling like what is it, like 1 million people displaced? Like leave, or we gonna start bombing. How can that many people even leave? In what time frame that you're gonna like decide you're bombing? Because they can't get out. So that I mean, yeah, so I just like with that piece, I'm always constantly thinking about like the displacement from land, especially when I look at a post Katrina New Orleans and the unhoused population is like very visible. And when I left in the 90s, the cost of living was cheap enough. And then there were people here with like multiple generations of family. So while there was poverty, there wasn't the not being housed, and just seeing that and thinking about that continuation of that. And this is something that's not in the piece, but like here there's like hospital complexes, because like the one thing with gentrifiers, they see like coming into the southeast region, like it's very green here. And having traveled through a lot of parts of the United States, see where you have access to green space, you have to have money. In the southeast, just in general, is not like that. Now the condition of that land is like a whole nother thing. But there's been a hospital complex and hospital complexes that have been empty since I got here, and I've watched them deteriorate returning home 10 years ago. And now they're boarded up, there's gates on them, but they sit over water, over a bayou. It's prime real estate. But when I think about, okay, there's people unhoused, but a hospital complex has everything people need: a kitchen, laundry facilities, bathrooms, individual showers, like private bathroom, and it's just being made to allow to deteriorate in whatever private hands, whatever private corporation or individuals own it, so that people are unhoused on purpose. They can use that to eventually tear it down, build condos on the bayou, and charge whatever obscene amounts of money that the salaries here don't afford the people who live here, or just regular working class people, period, to be able to afford that. And so it's on purpose. So while there's not a bomb dropping here, or clearing as in we're burning the land, then it's just like, gating up and just making sure, well, nobody can live there. So like you're living on the streets. But that's just that formal displacement, that structural continuous displacement by different methods. I mean, I just wanted, like, I wrote that piece to like, I want people to like really think about why they're seeing unhoused people. Like, it's not something natural. It's not something that's disconnected from you. While you might be in a house, you could just as easily not be in a house, like with an emergency or something. Um,
I mean,
yeah,
that was
so
something that's
that's
really well done in Crushing Wheelchairs, is that they show you that. They show you how really easy it is to go from having a place to live to not. And you know, yeah, and I don't mention it, especially around them. I joke about it around here a little bit, because ultimately for me it was kind of silly and short-lived. But I even experienced that briefly in 1989, a number. but just seeing how difficult it is, when you can't get a job if you don't have an address, you can't you or you don't have
Yeah.
a phone number, you can't, or how quickly uh, the inability to pay a bill or to pay a rent or to prove something or to provide something at any given, it's just very easy to and then it can be
Yeah.
difficult to get back in somewhere.
Does
So
that film take
yeah.
place in San Francisco? Is it centered in San Francisco?
No,
Like,
it was filmed in 3 separate weekends in Oakland,
okay,
in a place that they
okay.
call Hopefulness, where they have like a sort of houseless, I guess it's a housed community now, but former houseless, and but as they did, and I got to see this a little bit, part of their method when they were going from city to city was that they would get there early, and then the members of the Poor Magazine Collective, the Poverty Scholars Collective, they're out in the community. So when they were in Baltimore, they were talking with the houseless community. They were getting, comparing notes and talking to the people on the street that most of us walk past, and that, um, and uh, uh, and commiserating. And they were, so part of their presentation even last night was that they're seeing that, everybody's, obviously there are variations to it, but every, the country's, it's a massive problem with many people suffering variations of this. um and then if you start adding physical or mental injury to the
Hmm.
whole thing,
Yeah.
it's so yeah.
But we can vote our
Like,
way out of this.
well, one of my
We can
questions,
vote.
yeah, I mean, well, I do, one of my questions for you today was to ask, where are you on solutions, and what, in terms of public conversation, do you offer in terms of solutions? Um we could start, we can bring it up earlier than I had intended, but but that is on the list of things to ask you about. But because ultimately I'm stuck in terms of what to publicly advocate. So I don't know if you, yeah.
Yeah, I think like the solutions I always tell people, we can't find a solution until enough of a mass base understands the problem, because we keep like directing our energies towards band-aids. It's like putting a band-aid on a broken arm, or an open wound or a gashing wound, and like thinking, okay, well, that's gonna fix something. It's like, no, we're doing triage at the accident site, which we should continue to do, but we need to understand that's all we're doing is like some temporary triage to like, okay, help this right here, fix this right here, but that's not gonna be the solution, because I think the solution is something I, can't say on camera, but it's the one that nobody wants to really deal with because it requires work. It requires organization. It requires a level of discomfort, because we're very comfortable here, given, with the spoils of empire, not understanding that's what we have. Like, America is not like, we have all these things, because it reminds me, and again, I go off on tangents, so please feel free to stop me. It reminds me how, like, I think this was in a like a documentary clip or something one time ago, and it was some long time ago. In somebody, I don't remember what country they came from, and came to the United States and was like, "Oh, it's great here. Like, you guys have food, just all kinds of food from like all in the supermarket at all times." Although that's been changing lately, if anybody's been paying attention. But how great that is. And it's like Americans don't think about the fact that we have things available all the time, because they're being stolen and extracted from places that we don't think about, we don't have to consider. Like, I think there's a report recently, like chocolate, I guess, is tasting a little different And the chocolate that we have on the market, like most of it's grown in Ghana. It's a plant native to the Americas, as so many plants on the African continent are native to the Americas, being, to fuel Europe, to feed them and to like drive their profits. But I guess something happened recently where I don't know if there's some kind of movement happening in Ghana, because I do know the US military has an entire wing of the airport in Ghana, which means they can get mercenaries onto the African continent and then doing whatever fugazi they want to do without a passport. That's what that means to me. But if they take their land back, if they stop growing chocolate, because I guess some of the chocolate on the market has like actual not chocolate in it, which means that chemicals or whatnot, and people are noticing the difference. But chocolate can't be grown outside of the tropics. So if you live in the United States or Europe, we're not in the tropical zone. Like, these things can't be grown and produced here, but there's nowhere that you can't get them. And so if people in Ghana take their land back, which is what all decolonial struggles ultimately are, it's a land back issue, you're going to be uncomfortable and inconvenienced. And people just don't want to deal with that. And that's just small inconvenience, because you don't need chocolate or coffee or bananas or any number of like tropical products that we have omnipresent all the time, and don't have, and we don't think about that. And so, and that's a violent process to make that happen consistently. Okay, because like maybe somebody will like legitimately like trade with you a couple of times, but like at some point, like they don't do that. And I had a friend I was in a conversation with, and she's like, well, they need money, thinking about like the global south, like the poverty. And I'm like, no, they need land, because if you have land, you don't need money. Money is a made up thing. They literally print it out of thin air, and now it's just like, they make it up in a computer when they
Or
decide they need more.
if not land, some other political arrangement, because I'm just looking at this here from yesterday, and the argument here is that Ghana produces up to 800,000 tons of cocoa annually, with 70% of it exported as raw beans. So just like, so here Ghana has the land, but they don't have the political power or the productive capacity to turn that land into profit. So as it says here, 70% gets exported and leaving higher profits to foreign processors. So people think that they're getting that Swiss chocolate and all this other stuff, but they're just processing what they're taking from Ghana and putting their label on it, and they're making all the money. So that's why I keep focusing, to the extent it matters, on political power. So this is from Business News. I'm not even sure of the source here, forgive me, but anyway, but yeah, that's why I keep focusing on this point about political power, because there again, Ghana has the land. They just don't have at least in theory they have the land, but they don't have political control over it.
They don't, right.
And they don't get to make they don't benefit from it, which again just reminds me, just coming back to that Black Agenda piece you wrote. There was one other thing, because it reminded me of Lady Lugard in The Tropical Dependence, when you wrote here that in volume 1 of Das Kapital, Marx talks about the Duchess of Sutherland, who desired to run a wool farm in Britain, and in a 6-year period, 15,000 inhabitants and 3,000 families were systematically hunted and rooted out. All their villages were destroyed and burnt, all their fields turned into pasturage. British soldiers enforced this eviction and came to blows with the inhabitants. And that's just there in England.
That's just one, and that's just one instance.
Yeah, that's just one instance.
That's just one instance.
Before we even get to the rest of the world. But to your point, it's this recognition that the ruling elite need the land and the productive capacity to enrich themselves. So starting, and that's why Cecil Rhodes eventually wrote the reason he said we have to conquer the rest of the world is because we need room for ourselves here. Like, we have too many poor people in London. We're being overrun with our own poor. We need to send them out here to conquer this. We need to spread out. Lebensraum is what he was saying. He was Hitler before Hitler. It's like, we need to spread out. And ultimately what he's saying is so that those of us who have all the money and the land can enjoy it. Like, we can't have all these poors.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll send them out to settler colonize for us. And it's, yeah. And then in your piece, you move beyond that point of in Europe and talk about, again, the indigenous, the Palestinians, and connecting it right back to Black and working poor people here in the United States needing places to live. And it is all very much connected, for sure. So and I think that's something people will note in your writing, that you do this all the time, that you in very short, powerful pieces make all of these kinds of connections.
Yeah, I'm always trying to connect like something, because I'll have people think history doesn't matter. And it's like, oh, I need to focus on the present. But it's like, if you don't understand the past, you don't understand what's happening in the present, which is why we're in the constant like triage at the accident kind of situation, because we can never plan for understanding, oh, this is on purpose. This is a continuation of methodologies that they've been doing for centuries. But it's that's also part of the system. They keep us busy, too busy to like have time to think critically. And even when we encounter something, I mean, like trying to struggle over your immediate material needs winds up taking priority. I mean, like if you don't have food and a place to live, like that's your priority. You literally can't do anything else.
Right.
If you're hungry.
So before there is something that I admit in my head is the centerpiece of our conversation that I'm waiting to get to, but I'm just going to keep teasing that for a minute. It's in part something you already talked about on millennials, but I want to really drill down on it and spend some time with it in my very kind of childish ways. I'm feeling kind of childish and immature, to be honest, at the moment. But the title of that I took for this for this video comes from a piece you wrote also about a year ago in Grassroots Thinking, called "The Real Body Politic," where you start off by making reference to Du Bois's The World in Africa, and where he says that the sin of capitalism is secrecy, the deliberate concealing of the character, methods, and result of efforts to satisfy human wants. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean here in The Real Body Politic, with as fly a version of the American flag as I think we could expect to get? I mean, it's pretty gruesome and inappropriate. Yeah.
That's those red stripes. It's blood flying. It's blood flowing down the streets. That's literally what the red stripes. That's what they mean.
With that strange fruit on them.
Yep.
Yeah.
But thinking about when I read that, and that line kind of struck me as, it's the reason why I say like people don't know history or don't think history is important. And when we think about, we know surface level history of, we understand things were bad, or maybe they might have been a little violent or exploitative, but like the methods of creating the society that we have, the methods that maintain empire, that maintain the United States, Europe, the settler colonies, we don't think about the violence, and that part is hidden. So I really wanted to, and I talked about like the methods. There's always, the pack, who, they're always outnumbering whoever it is they're killing or torturing. The documentarians, whether it was the written records, the photos with the evolution of the camera, the videos that they have now, like they document things as though there's nothing wrong with it. The tortures, because it's the excessive things, like killing somebody is one thing, but there's like an excess that's happening to take someone's life. That's always part of it's present. And the humiliators, right? Like of humiliating the victim, in particular when it comes to like removing their clothing. Like what? Why? The sadist, they have to be getting some sort of enjoyment out of it because there's too much consistency and continuity of these methods. So thinking about them, the perpetrators, they have to be getting something out of it. And then it's the collectors, where they take on keepsakes from a kill. And I mean, you can see this consistently in the colonial record through now. Like when I think about, and I think I didn't write part this in the piece. I think this was like part of what I took out because it was getting long. When we think of Las Casas in that see that Gen X brain, the name just escaped me, but Las Casas, yeah,
Bartolomeo.
the account of the destruction of the Indies. He talks about the methods of basically how the land was cleared, the violence of it. And I remember recently, or this past year, was it Christy Nome, like Kim's name that she calls her, Cunty Nome. But there's some incident, whatever happened, there's so much happening, but she stood at the podium and it said, one of ours, all of yours, like was actually like posted on the podium. And people, sometimes some people, like I was looking online and kind of likened that to like the Nazi era or something, but I'm like, no, that goes back further than that. Because you have, when I think about Las Casas, he had, and I'm going to read this. And what happened on the odd occasion, and this is in Haiti, the locals did kill a European. Remember, this is in defense. The Europeans invaded. As given the enormity of the crimes committed against them, they were in all justice fully entitled to. The Spanish came to an unofficial agreement among themselves that for every European killed, 100 natives would be executed. That's one of ours, all of yours. Right? And so what that means is, oh, they successfully defended themselves and killed two of y'all who were brutalizing them, because the methods of killing that are in the book are just like, it's very eye-opening and telling. And if you, okay, they killed two people, then it's like, okay, well, we're going to kill 200 natives. Whatever the day makes, you wake up the next day, oh, we only did 30? Oh, okay, keep going. 31, 32, 33, 34. I mean, like they're keeping count. Like, what the fuck? Right? And these are people who were never held to account. And these are people where I say, like, they breed the psychopathy amongst themselves. Because number one, it doesn't work. You can't do that if you're not divorced from your own humanity. And the thing is, we deal with these people and we're trying to appeal to a humanity that they don't have. Like, if we behave a certain way, they won't kill us. If we adopt their method of living, if we speak their language, if we do all of these things, everything that they tell us we have to do, like that's gonna stop. Right? Because even when you see, and I always say, like, everything throughout the colonial record from then until now, it's a confession. When I think about like the Epstein files, and there's always something about somebody in the tropics, on the African continent, in the America, being cannibals. And here they are literally consuming children. Because there was I don't know if you remember this video, what was her name? Gabriela Rico Jimenez. She was like a Mexican model. She was like, I don't know, like 2019 or whatnot. And there was a video, because it surfaced online again after like one of the Epstein file dumps. And she's like screaming and talking about, it's in Spanish, so somebody's translating about, okay, aside from murder, like they're eating people, they're eating children. And she sounded crazy, and people, and she was dismissed at the time, and she has never been seen again since that night, just FYI. And I remember I looked at that and I was just like, no, that happened. She's not crazy. She didn't look crazy, inebriated, hot. She looked freaked the fuck out. And so that was, maybe that video was like 2016, 17. I remember, but Gabriela Rico Jimenez, that was her name. And you can find the video online. But like, she's talking about this, and you see this as some continuity. And so they're accusing people who they encountered in the global south of being cannibals, and they are literally consuming children. There was also in that video, and again, the documentarians, there were two pictures in one of those dumps. One was Prince Andrew looking way younger over what appeared to be a comatose child. Like the child was not in, like 4, 5. There was no explanation for that photograph. Why the fuck are you taking pictures? That's what I mean. They're so divorced from human, like they're not doing anything wrong in their minds. That's a psychopath. Because if you have your humanity, first of all, you wouldn't do that. And if you were doing whatever you're doing, like you know not to take fucking pictures. And there was another photo with another kid, like Jeffrey Epstein himself. Again, a child appearing to be in some sort of comatose, like immobile situation. And these are the people who are in control of the productive forces of society. These are the people who, too many of the masses try to emulate and think we can be like them. And it's like, to be like them, to have the money, that's the methods that they got it. The violence.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say, for whatever records, that according to Google AI's overview, none of these claims are substantiated. They are all misinterpretations, fabrications, AI falsifications, context misinterpretations, misdefinitions of what cream cheese meant, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm just telling you what Google told me to say. So, you know,
Got it.
just putting that out there.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, but again, you know, even to the point of what you've talked about in this piece, I had forgotten about the making of a money purse out of Nat Turner's skin. We've talked more recently around here and on Black Liberation Media about the move bombing and the housing of the bones in the private collection in the museum there. But you talk about the skulls in France from Algerian resistance fighters. You know, you mentioned him earlier. James Baldwin even had that short story about the white man, where it starts off where he's unable to pleasure his wife in bed. Then he goes out and lynches someone and takes his body parts back home in somebody in the chat will remember what the name of that story is. But I was, obviously what the Nazis did to Jews. I mean, there's this long history of that kind of colonial, disgusting type of thing. And then to your point, then what we get even during the last election is it's the immigrants that are going to come here and eat your dogs. And it's like, no, there's a whole track record of history here of documented of what you all do. So
And I mean, like, thank
yeah.
goodness they document it, because we would never believe it. Right? Like, you can't believe it until you actually read what they wrote. right? Because that's what Ida B. Wells did. Like
Mm-hmm.
she wrote what they published in their press. Like, so nobody could say she made it up.
I mean,
Nobody
we
could
read the books
say,
you talk
oh, you
about, those
misinterpreted.
postcard books, those lynching postcard books. You wrote about it. We've seen them. You know, they're the little handwritten, you know, hey, cousin Ed, had a great weekend.
And that's the disconnect. Like these postcards were like innocuous objects for them. They just, like the way you would use a postcard now, like you're on a road trip and you see
That's what I'm
something
saying.
and like, okay, just disconnected from the image that's on it. And even in the, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you because you said we're of a similar generation. Do you ever happen to remember in the 1980s when John Stockwell, the former CIA agent, made a name in video interviews and radio, exposing what the CIA had done with all of its torture training and School of the Americas? And I remember him telling one story where he would talk about this woman who survived her torture, recounting a story of how she heard her torturer talking, you know, going into the next room to call home and you know, and being given instructions from his spouse about what groceries to pick up. And then he's like, yeah, honey, I'll get the, you know, the oranges and the juice. And then he hangs up, says, I love you, and comes back in the room and back to the nightmare and the horror as if nothing's, as if, no, I'm just at work, honey. Yeah. And when I wrap up at the office, I'll grab it's like, that's the, yeah.
Psychopathy. And if we don't understand that that's what we're dealing with, and even in just the consistency and the global nature of it. So when we think about these postcards, the lynching postcards, I remember what made me first look into it. Like I feel like it was low key. He had a line in a track. I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube, but on postcards, we'll just say on postcards. I was like, did he just say? And so I started looking into that, and then I found some of the images, and it's like they had postcards, and they also had stamps. Like the French had stamps where it was just like five, and they were used in the same way at the same time frame. Because printing, especially like postcards in the late 19th century, that wasn't like now where you can be disconnected from the process of making them. This was an up close and personal individual. So even the people not directly involved in the violence, then there's the indirect, because if somebody gives me some film to develop and I'm like, what the like, no, and they're just, oh yeah, this is normal. There's a psychopathy in that. And the thing is we often don't think about, because it's not really comfortable to think about, that just like you're saying that, you know, where he's like, oh, hi, honey. Yeah, you know, I'm going to do this. And then going back to doing like some inhumane stuff. We're interacting with people and we can't tell. I always say white supremacy is very good at hiding crazy, because it will be people they look normal. And then you read about the crazy shit that they're doing, that they say they've done. And we don't think about the fact that, okay, when you think about the crowd in the photographs, the lynch mobs, there are children there. Because I remember finding something one time, this was a long time ago, so I'm trying to remember, but it was like they would send notes to school, because these were sometimes like published in the paper in advance, like you're having a parade or some shit. Like, oh, please excuse Sally from school today. She's going to see her first lynching.
Yeah.
And what that does to a child who then has children, who then has more children.
What's his name? The actor years ago, I remember reading, I think Henry Fonda. I think it's Henry Fonda was the actor who talked about being a little boy when his grandfather took him to a lynching. Something like that. I think that's him. Somebody can check me on that, or I'll check later. But I'm pretty sure I don't like to trust my memory, but I feel like that's a solid one. And yeah, Brittany confirmed, so it must be true. Yeah. Like, so it's like, it's not even like, because I remember I was a younger man, you know, kid at the time or whatever, young, whatever. But I was like, wow, that's a pretty famous actor. And this is not that long ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not some ancient history, you know?
It's a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we, you know, especially I remember when as a kid vividly being told, like we were being conditioned to believe that the civil rights era had solved everything. And we were supposed to, you know, recognize we were being raised in a privileged moment where all of this was old, you know, distant past history. And yeah, Jane Fonda recounted this story too. Okay, so right on. Yeah. So yeah. Yep. Look, everybody, look, the undefeated chat. Henry Fonda, 1905 to 82, witnessed the brutal lynching of a black man named Will Brown in Omaha, Nebraska on September 28th, 1919. Wow. And September 28th is my birthday too. That's weird. But yeah, check that out. That's thank you for that.
I
Wata.
have to look for that.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. So but it also reminds me, you know, this well, it's a slight change of actually not I was going to say it's a slight change of pace, but not really, because there was something else that you wrote about in that body politic piece that I wanted to ask you about specifically. Because you say, as Orasami Burton has discusses in the chapter on gender and tip of the spear, aspects of the conditions that led to the Attica uprising often involved carnal activity where guards systematically gang R-worded, starved and injured men. And honestly, I wanted to just ask you what you thought of that chapter in particular. And to be even better, I should have told you in advance I wanted to ask you about that chapter, because I'm very interested in how people are interpreting that chapter in particular. I think it's a very challenging and disturbing, and maybe I'm just projecting, but I found it to be particularly challenging and disturbing. So yeah, maybe we can even come back and talk about that separately at some point, but give you some time to maybe think more if you don't have it already loaded up. But yeah, off the top, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I remember reading that chapter and not being surprised, being very angry, but not being surprised and not reacting to it the way that it should have. Because once, for me, like I said, once you read Ida B. Wells' his work and that made me angry a long time ago. And looking at white people like side eye ever since, especially if I see a group, a collective, I'm just like, you know, my spidey senses are tingling. I'm like, wait, what? Because they look so normal, right? They function at work with us, out in the supermarket, and you can't tell who's who. But it wasn't a surprise. And I remember seeing Ori do an interview somewhere, and he's like someone who actually like read the book, or people who had actually engaged with the book, and they pretended as though that chapter didn't exist and really talked about the rest of the book. And I'm like, but how can you ignore that chapter? Like, that's the heart. To me, it was like the beating heart of what was happening. It's the beating heart of what makes the United States function. Because he's just talking about one place in a time frame.
In a very relatively limited, short moment, one
It's
place.
a moment. He's talking about one moment. But I remember he said that, like somebody, they just acted as though that chapter didn't exist. And it's, I mean, is it?
I don't think it's an excuse or excusable, but I do understand. I mean, that chapter, I think, in ways that I think, and I'll just say it this way, that in ways that don't allow for easy dismissal as unsupported conspiracy, that you might read in other books or hear somewhere else, it makes, for me, it makes me continue to rethink almost everything I think I understood about sexuality, gender, performance, preference. I mean, it's yeah. So I can understand why a group of people or an individual would say, I even unconsciously, I'm not dealing with chapter 5. I'm just I'm just going to skip, because everything else is almost, the book is obviously phenomenal, but everything else is almost like sort of the routine abuse that we're used to reading about,
Right.
or learning more about. But chapter 5, I'll just, speaking for myself, is yeah,
It's disturbing. It's disturbing to
am
know,
I wrong? Is
again.
chapter 5 not the gender chapter? I thought chapter 5 was the gender chapter. Now
I thought it was it could be chapter 4,
my
chapter
bad.
5. Look, I'm like, the book
I'll
is I meant to have like a couple of my books here. Look, I'm gonna go grab mine too.
let me double check while we sitting here. No, it is 4. I'm wrong. Gender Wars chapter 4. So I apologize. I was
Okay.
absolutely wrong. So let me just double back there and say, I can understand why people would be like, I'm just going to act like chapter 4 didn't happen. I'm just going to pretend.
Yeah.
Or even read like the first couple of pages and be like, nah. Maybe that's what I was doing. I skipped to chapter 5 in my head. I was just like, I just skipped. It's like, but yeah. So I would like, and as well as Dr. Burton writes, I think his research is even better.
Yeah.
The research in
And
that book is
phenomenal. It's And then
so.
I think for me too, see, I feel like since I always read stuff like that. So it's like, even when things with the genocide in Palestine that we're watching live stream still in the midst of the 3rd year, like, some people were shocked, right? But nothing, unfortunately, about what we're witnessing is shocking to me, because I've read so much of the colonial records and the violence and psychopathy of whiteness. And it's that tie to the political construction of whiteness that's breeding the psychopathy, because that's the only way whiteness can exist. Because we're not talking about individual or collective white people or specific groups of Europeans. We're talking about the construction of whiteness has to create the mechanisms that are needed to violently maintain the system. Yep. Put mine up too.
Just following instructions from the chat. And do please, if whatever other interviews Chitimacha is referencing, certainly definitely check out the interviews we've done here. And you can even, I think they're freely available on my Patreon. I think the classes I did, because I use his book for my asynchronous classes. So, but just read and what book? Tip of the Spear, Orasami Burton's Tip of the Spear.
The spear. There for the spear.
And yeah. All right. So now I want to get to, so you did talk a little bit about this on millennials, but I want to come back to something that I didn't know you wrote until preparing for today. But I want to talk about Jesus. I want to talk about let's talk about Jesus, because folks, in the show description is Terri's link tree where you can get everything I am working with. And I cannot recommend it enough. The material image of Jesus. Please give us your over like a summary of what you were saying here, and then yeah, I definitely would chat it up with you about it. Chat about it with you for a moment.
So again, and I'll like tell this story briefly again, but like in thinking and being around, and I always say my disclaimer when I'm talking about Black people, I'm not singling us out, but that is almost exclusively who I'm around in my social settings and whatnot. And so I keep hearing I'm around people who they're either ignoring the genocide or kind of not tapped in, doing whatever, but then they will talk about Jesus. And I'm like, but Jesus's people are being like bombed, like they're being wiped out with your tax dollars. And came across this, I was driving past, and it was this like life size or larger than life size image of Jesus, a white man, a European man. If you didn't recognize the iconography of the image, you saw like a European, right? And so they take a European man, they give him the stylings of like the region to try to gaslight us. But when I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's what's causing the confusion. And I was also in someone's home, like elders, they all had that same image of Jesus, like growing as a kid, no matter who, no matter whose home you went into, they all had the same image. And I started thinking about, because I'm like, that's what's causing the confusion. And I'm like, well, where did everybody get the same image? It's not like you go into a store and you find it and buy it. And so kind of
Can
just
I
started
interrupt
doing.
you because before you outline where they got the image, because I wanted, I endeavored, with all due respect to you, to give some name to what you've done here. So I tentatively want to call this Jesus in the Chitimacha 3-step propaganda model. It needs some sort of I'm happy to have that name improved. It was just an off the cuff, off the top of my mind thought. But what you've done here deserves some sort of name. You've outlined it, you've given steps to it, you've laid out the process, and I think it's perfectly accurate. So as people hear you talk about the producers, the obscurance and acceptance, I think they need to be hearing that and reading it as the Chitimacha 3-step propaganda model. Because like in media studies, like I remember we got the traditional 2-step model, if I remember correctly. No, I don't even remember, but they had the 2-step model and the hypodermic needle and the this, that, and the third. So why not? So I just want to give that, I want to name that, or encourage you to rename it, give it a name so that we can deploy it. The Chitimacha 3-step propaganda model. Because I think it's exactly how it works, by the way. I think you've described it perfectly using Jesus as the example. But all right, with that said, please go ahead.
But yeah, so thinking about that that image and just how it was like produced. So as a materialist, thinking about like how did everybody get it, and coming across Warner Salmon, right, who reproduced, but like there was a trajectory of like reproducing the image. So when we think about the first images produced, or rather the oldest image of Jesus was done like 200 years after like
and this
he was gone.
looks like something I drew in like in middle school. Is this really supposed to be?
Yeah,
honestly, this looks exactly like what I would have been doodling with.
Yeah.
And this is AD or CE 232, considered to be the first in my notes, I noted that as you wrote that this first depiction comes 200 years after he was supposed to have lived. So I just want to
Yep.
throw that out there real quick. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please continue.
Yep. Got a nice little afro going. But
It's-
you
it's-
know, like
maybe early
you know,
locks, some twists.
that look. Hey, so you know the image, the modern image that we have of a man who was not depicted during his lifetime, but 200 years later in the region, right? That's what we have. But then we all have this image, you know, now, and there, you know, and I was kind of tracing just the evolution of that image, because there was a, like, side note, there was some Zionist on Twitter, and he had a picture of the Last Supper, which is Leonardo da Vinci's, you know, like the Last Supper. And he puts a quote, and he's just like, I guess thinks he's owning people, and he's like, all of the people in this image were Jewish. I'm like, you know, I got time today. Just like, yeah, depicted by a European man in Europe, people who never stepped foot in Europe. So what's your point? Like, and 1500 years after the fact. And so people, you know, we have this idea of what people look like, because everything we have now is filtered through a white supremacist media structure. And so we don't even know. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Like, it's just crazy how we just like latch onto that image. And I think that image, the Last Supper, Warner Salmon, these images in particular, that Warner Salmon image, that was like mass produced, and like soldiers had like pocket-sized versions of it. And so it's causing confusion in everyone, including white people, of people, what Jesus, being from that region, would have actually looked like. And he's depicted as in their image. You know, when they say God made man in his image, they meant them. And it's like, and I always think also the ridiculousness of, you know, Jesus never stepped foot in Europe. None of these people in the Bible ever stepped foot in Europe, right? And I remember also, like, when, you know, I guess it was when we had textbooks, I think this was like in the 5th grade, and there was an image of the region where all the events of the Bible were taking place, and it was the Red Sea. So there's Africa to the, you know, to the west, and there's, you know, Asia to the east. And I remember having this conversation with this white girl, like, she was from out of town. I think, like, she was a little different. And I was saying something about, oh, I want to go to Africa somewhere. You know where? Like, I just knew we came from Africa. And she goes, oh, go to Egypt. I'm like, Egypt's not in Africa. And she looks at, she's like, Egypt is in Africa. And I'm like, no, it's not. And I'm thinking, like, we got this picture again pulled out of context, because we have, you know, all of these events in the Bible taking place not in Europe. So they have to kind of, just like the Red Sea is some body of water floating wherever it's floating. Because the next day she brings a map, like an actual map. And then I see, like, oh, the Red Sea, Egypt, Palestine, like Israel, all
And
of
it's
it.
not even a
And I was
real
like,
sea. And at the
and it's not
time that
even
all these events were supposed to have happened, it wasn't even a real sea. The Suez Canal didn't exist. And it was in
yep,
Egypt and in Israel, as they are today, are landlocked.
yep.
So I used to always joke, like, you didn't even have to cross no water. You could just stroll over it. You don't need all this parting of this and all this drama. You just walk on over there.
You can just walk on over there. Exactly.
And then the
Exactly.
Red Sea's not even that wide. Like,
It's
again,
not.
I was forced to go through it many times. And it's like you can see both sides at points. It's like, what do you, it's not even that. It's like, y'all need to stop. Stop it.
I know. And so, like, you know, it's like all of this to cause confusion, or to cause people to not question still, like, how it's justification for genocide, but it's serving as justification for genocide. But these images of, you know, Warner Salmon, and, you know, there's a printing press in the United States. there's I think like the Dore Bible was like the first time they had like actually pictorially.
No, but this is what,
produced.
but this is what I'm saying. So like, this is why I want you to have a named model here, because again, to the point of all your broader work, you make these really important connections between, as you said, starting with what's happening with Black life here, making connections to the rest of the world. And if I can, just very quickly, I had to highlight this because even as you write, Jesus of Nazareth, who was born in Bethlehem, do people even grapple with that? Like that, you know, and I'll just say, all right, this, you talk about your own tangents. If so this is a book I'm reading now, Christ Before Jesus, Evidence for the Second Century Origins of Jesus by Matthew Britt and Jaron Wingo, where they are making the mythicist argument that Jesus never existed and is a figment of oral tradition and Greek. And a lot of what they're arguing is that it's what we're actually reading is a rebranded Greek tragedy of like it's Greek literature. Oh man, and so many overlaps. And because people don't read Hebrew, and then I'm reading Ghassan Kanafani about the Zionist literature for our next discussion with Sudeep, and he's talking about what my own grandmother used to say, that Hebrew is for the elite religious colonizers, not the actual people, but Hebrew had to be elevated as a language to create the nationalism for a post-World War II Zionist movement. So anyway, but in that book, and with another one of the atheist debate spaces that I look at, Apologia, there's this discussion around that point that you just raised passingly here, in terms of where was Jesus actually from and how do we get there. So I'm hoping to get some further answers around this, because Apologia has said the reason he doesn't believe in mythicism, he's a full-on atheist, but the reason he's not a mythicist and believes Jesus was an actual person is because there was a need to concoct a story to explain how this person born in Nazareth could actually be from Nazareth, could actually be born in Bethlehem, to satisfy the story of that they thought was prophesied. So, but his point is the fact that they had to create this story shows that somebody probably actually existed that had to have this, you know, mythology attached to. In the book I was just showing there, and I asked the author this question to respond to Paul's thing. They're arguing that, actually I can't even recite the argument, but they're arguing that that's not necessarily the case, and that doesn't, that the reason that there are these competing stories is because they're taking elements of oral traditions and other Greek myths and trying to fashion this story to attach it to a Hebrew Bible that they're not reading in its original language, because they're reading the Greek translation and trying to make it all fit. And that's why you end up where as you just say in passing on the way to making many more important points, that you have this guy called Jesus of Nazareth who was actually born in Bethlehem. So how why make it make sense? And so I just wanted to do that quick detour to say that I'm acknowledging that this is a debated topic in these spaces, and that question, I think, for most people who don't consider these histories, is never really raised. Like, wait a minute, Nazareth, Bethlehem, why are we getting these competing anyway? So, but the real point I'm trying to get to is that you with your 3-step model, you show the producers. You start with, okay, we have this. how do we get this? Because as you've already explained, it doesn't make any sense that somebody who's never been to Europe would look like this in that part of the world. Or as John Henry Clark said, at that time, the only Europeans who would have been around were Greek or Roman. Jesus was neither Greek nor Roman, so therefore he could not have looked like this. But you say that you have these producers, and you say the oldest known representation that we just showed is from 235 CE, or whatever the exact date is, from a church in Dura Europos. All right. And then you point out, as you've been talking about, Warner Sallman's Head of the Christ here is produced in 1940 as part of an extension of this centuries old, millennia old process of producing this image. And I'm oversimplifying and rushing through your point just to give a quick outline here. But and then you talk about the obscurants who come later after this mythology has been in this imagery has been produced, who further the mythology by obscuring the actual history, and then you bring it to where there is ultimately acceptance, which I think is again a perfectly appropriate way of modeling how this works. The producers produce it, the obscurers obscure and echo it and impose it, and then it leads to an acceptance almost unquestioningly of what cannot actually make any sense.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have you come back and talk about any or all of that. I just wanted to quickly outline for folks what you did and why I'm trying to say that it deserves a title, a Chitimacha 3-step propaganda model. Because I honestly, I think it works. It's perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it was like that piece. It was funny. I wrote that piece, and like one or two friends that will actually like read things that I write, liberals, and it's just like, yeah, this is good, but like you're just gonna have to post that somewhere because talking about Jesus is really touchy. And I'm like, really? He's like, well, I think you made your point, but like, yeah, nobody's gonna. So I was like, okay, well, I wrote it. I just posted it on Medium, but yeah, and it's just like I hear even there was like around Christmas time too, and it was something. You know how there's a debate of like, oh, because some people say Happy Holidays, and like, no, we're celebrating Christ. This is Christmas, and it was a Black woman saying, like, I'm tired of this. I'm just gonna say Merry Christmas. This is about Jesus Christ, and I'm like, whose literal relatives are being bombed? But okay, but again, it's that imagery that we grow up with that causes that confusion. Like we don't question that why we're seeing Europeans in the places we're seeing Europeans. They're less than 10% of the global population. But all of us, while we may not physically encounter each other all the time, we always encounter Europeans. But there's mechanisms in place serving capitalism, violent mechanisms that make that happen. And propaganda is a huge part of that. And we're not questioning. Because even that, like I wrote about that, like Jasmine Crockett, who I will say for the record, unlike Kamala Harris, I believe she genuinely cares about Black people. But if you're in a position of power, if you're that close to the psychopath, like nothing makes you question, as a Black woman, what am I missing? What am I missing that all of these white folks are just like the media apparatus, the elected officials are just on board with bombing the Palestinians, with wiping the Palestinians off the map? Like nothing clicks. Your spidey senses don't tingle because you may.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I would say like she may not have time, but like you got Gen Z staffers. It's do a little digging. It's not that hard to find information and to just dismiss it. Well, it's been happening for 2,000 years and it's as long before me. Like, stop. You're educated. You're a lawyer. Stop. So.
Well, so again, why, and I admit, I'm happy to put all of my biases on the table here, but one of what I really do, and I'm going to refer to it as this all the time, and until you come up with a better title or tell me to change it, I'm going to refer. The way I've done the Vernon philosophy, we have the Chitimacha 3-step model, because it, on the one hand, I think for many of us in these spaces, we could say, yeah, it makes sense that they would have a problem with this. But I do think it helps to have, especially for those of us who are educators or want to teach a little bit about this, to have, or organizers, to have a way of saying, no, this is an outcome predicted because of a process that was intended to produce it as an outcome. And that is how propagandists function. There is an intended outcome. How do we arrange and shape that public opinion? Or, as Jen Easterly said, construct their cognitive infrastructure. So when you talk about for instance, and make this great point here about people can't, who for me to go somewhere and correct I would correct something, I might have to get on a plane, where tickets are expensive and luxury can't afford. This meant film and art often became the sole way of encountering those from distant lands, and also a way of reaching them if you have the power to produce these films, or the power to produce, as you write here, the lithographs, and to reproduce the images, and the presses to not only replicate, but then have them sold to churches. It's not like if Chitimacha had developed that original depiction of Jesus and made it a fly new version based on that original, you would not have the ability to mass produce and then have the access to churches to sell it, and have it become what everyone ultimately has to initially go through that step of because I think even I'll admit for myself, whenever somebody says Jesus, I have to consciously go through the step of saying, this is not him. Then I have to go to the next step of saying he would have looked much more black. And then I'm now at the step where I'm saying he didn't even exist. But that's a whole other level of argument that I'm still evolving myself. But really the point still being that we're not questioning, as you're asking us to, how we're reaching our conclusions. How do we know what we know, and why do we like what we like? And then you beautifully, along the way, I want to shout you out again, take nice shots at people like Bill Maher and Kamala Harris and whomever else, for doing just that, and saying, we've had this long battle, and there's been this long war, and even though I may not believe in this as Bill Maher claims, I at least am aware that the non-spiritual or the non-mystical part of this stuff is real, that Jews were really there, the Jews that are there now are the Jews of antiquity, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on, all to be, so yeah, anyway, I loved what you did here. And then you're right, as someone pointed out in the chat, Jasmine is parroting the colonial dismissiveness of white supremacist genocide in Gaza. And she's aided to that by her religious beliefs and the mythology and the symbolism around it, which leads to, as you conclude, the acceptance. What does it mean to have empire reproduce iterations of a man not native to Europe and claim him as their own?
Mm-hmm.
That as a question is...
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
But I think it speaks to the power of the propaganda. People don't even raise, a lot of people don't even raise the question of how is this man? How
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And I think it's also because it will produce some sort of psychic rupture or break, because if you're ideologically tethered to a belief system, and that belief system, like even questioning that image, it makes you question, well, what the hell else? And to understand that you've been living in the fog of propaganda and you think you're free and a free thinker, that's not, that can be quite unsettling for people, right? And I mean, certain things have been unsettling for me, understanding, but I mean, it's a process that you go through to come through, get through the fog and come through the other side where you can see clearly. Right. And I mean, but yeah, it's just like, it's so much of like, how is genocide taking place in a location where your faith comes from? Okay. Like, there's nothing I mean, like, you have to be tied. So like but that psychic break needs to happen. And it's not going to be comfortable, because it's just, I think people just, they want to be comfortable. They don't want to be uncomfortable, and they don't want to question. Like, you're always talking about like why you know what you know, like why you believe what you believe, because then if this is a lie or if this is a misrepresentation, what else? And then the actions you've taken in your life, what else have you done or could have done or did incorrectly or damaging to yourself and those around you based on believing in propaganda promoted by this image?
Yeah, and the way you conclude, you already mentioned it, but I just want to bring it back. The way you conclude the piece here is really on point. Many Black people believe in Jesus, yet do not make the connection that the descendants of his literal kith and kin are being slaughtered, all justified based on an image promulgated by our colonial masters. And that's exactly right. That did you read that Shlomo Sand's book? That Shlomo Sand book, The Invention of the Jewish People?
Did that one on audio, and then I started reading the PDF. So I'm not through it, but yeah, like that was powerful.
I've only listened to the audio, so I haven't actually, so I don't know. I know some people don't count that as reading, but it's
information gathering. It counts as information gathering, because I look at audiobooks like, if you want to, okay, there's 10 books I want to read. I don't have enough physical time, material time to make that happen. So maybe I have time to read 2, but okay, there's another 3 of them that are available via audiobook, and they're related to the 2 that I like have the actual book to read. So then I'm gaining knowledge. But then, like, a lot of times with something that I'll do via audiobook, I'll go back and read, because I'm like, okay, these 2 chapters deserve like some detailed attention.
Oh yeah,
Audiobooks
it's
count.
definitely, and I'm thinking of McLuhan's Hot and Cold Media, but there is a difference between reading and listening, and the levels of concentration required, and the level of. So I do take it as a step down from reading, but it's, and all I can say is that it is, to the extent Sands is correct, and I'm not in a position to challenge his scholarship. To the extent he's correct, nobody knows anything about Jews. That's what I walked away from. None of the discussions that people have about Jews and Judaism today is correct. None of it. None of it. Yeah. No one, nowhere, none of it, because the history and what he goes into to talk about the narrative creation, the naming creation, the historical beefs, centuries, even decades of literary beef among Jews about who is a Jew, just among Jews, self-defined, at least. So it's like, and then he talks about the shifts that in the definition post Second World War, obviously connected to the modern Zionist movement. So it's like, that's where I'm at with it. Like, I'm not claiming expertise. I just know that whoever's out here claiming expertise ain't an expert either. They're awesome. That's where I'm at with it. Like, you all don't know, this is some nonsense. Yeah, anyway. So I do have to start to move us towards an end here. There was one other thing I definitely wanted to ask you to talk some about that we haven't gotten to. There was really two. One, I did mention you had some. I love the criticism of Kamala Harris that you've written a little bit about, but talked about on millennials. So I did want to invite it because we're going to have to deal with her again apparently in another election.
Yes.
But I also just wanted to quickly to raise up the fact that you, in one of the, I forgot which one now, you mentioned the infamous Powell memo. And I thought it would be worth revisiting. I think it's for a forthcoming piece that is not yet published. Is that what the one?
On the literacy?
The literary
yes,
crisis?
I think you're one of the first people to read that.
Oh.
So I haven't. Yeah, I'm still working. I feel like I've laid out the origins of the literacy crisis,
Mm-hmm.
which is not methods that people are thinking about, but I was tying it to the why it happened and tying it to radical movements. And so I feel like maybe I'm going to work on that piece a little bit.
I love it. I mean, you mentioned that the 1971 Powell memo expressed concerns that capitalist principles were being ideologically rejected by America's youth. And I went back and just scanned it quickly just to refresh my memory, because I think so much more should be done about the Powell memo. I think it's really deep. That this guy is saying we're losing. White capitalist America is losing. We need to fight back. But also that this targeting of the youth. I also thought of the fifth tenet of the COINTELPRO against Black America, targeting Black youth, moving them away from radical politics. So this was like the macro version of that, saying, Powell was saying, everybody, even our own whites, are becoming radicalized, and we gotta fix that. So yeah, I just thought, and maybe there's a connection from the Powell memo to Kamala Harris. You're muted. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One thing I do think about is I always like, because having worked with youth, that's always the target, right? Because or even if you think about like what's happening with the genocide in Gaza, they know they've lost millennials. They know they've lost Gen Z. So what they're concentrating on now is youth, like people who are in elementary school, people who are in middle school. And it's our responsibility to, by whatever means we have, whether they be the kids, the neighbors, nieces, nephews, kids, whomever, is to make sure we're consistently like countering propaganda. Because when I see, like when we hear things in the media, we see them say things, or like what I call the triplets, Trump, Lutnick, and Scott Bessent. And they say things, and if you know what's happening, it's like, oh my God, just a blatant, but you realize, oh, they're saying things, there's an audience, or they're saying things not for me because they know I'm lost. They're working on creating a record for the younger generation to come up and have certain types of propaganda, because they see they've lost the narrative with so many of the youth, just like in the 60s with the boomer generation. They lost control of the narrative, so they had to work on Gen X, which is why we got all that like anti-communist propaganda. We got all the, they put mechanisms in place to make sure, because like I'm around Gen Xers, and very different from a lot of the people I'm organically around, just generationally, because like people are still steeped in the propaganda that, I escaped it for some reason, or reversed it. I came through the fog for some reason. But right now, like I have no doubt that there's specific types of targeting, and just because that piece was about literacy, the way that the literacy declined, I mean, like there's people thinking it came out of nowhere. Oh, it came out of the pandemic. I'm like, the pandemic is not enough time to produce a population
Exactly.
who's 60% who reads at the majority read at of adults read at a sixth grade level. Like a pandemic is not enough time to, produce that. Like this has been decades of policy.
Yeah, they've been
And
talking about newspapers have been written at the sixth grade level since I was a kid. Like, and it was reiterated even when I was in grad school. So this is a very old, like there's never really been. And was it in, I think it was in the interview. Where was that? Well, now I can't remember where I got this. Where there was a reflection on, oh, it was another video entirely, but they were making it. I'm sorry, but they were making the point that a similar point about. In fact, what they were doing, it was a critique of Jimmy Fallon and late night television, and they were talking about Jimmy Fallon being the end result of a decades-long process to walk society away from what was at a time some decades ago a higher level of intellectualism in politics, and they had a clip of one of those old oh man, what was his name? Somebody I actually remember as a kid, but one of those old white talk shows where they interviewed James Baldwin, and so on national television, there's like this relative to today, some deep political conversation about race and history, and then they were like, and now look at Jimmy Fallon, and it's yeah. So sorry, but that it was a parallel argument to what you're making here. About literacy and the Powell memo wanting to reclaim. Yeah.
And I will say as a teaser, because I actually, when I resolve that piece, I would like to come back.
Oh yeah, please.
I
Yeah,
will
absolutely.
say the assault of AI is coming to us via the same mechanism as the destruction of literacy. So I will
Wait, say that
like this
again.
thing. The rollout, the assault of AI being rolled out is coming to us via the same mechanism that created the literacy crisis, the same vehicle. So I'll just leave that as a teaser.
All right, perfect. I look forward to that. And yes, thank you, 2Fs. It was Dick Cavett. That was
Okay.
the one that they were talking about. And to see the clip, they actually played the clip in the video. And it is kind of wild to be like, no, it's not the highest level of political conversation, probably, but to watch Dick Cavett have like a real conversation, like seemingly a real conversation about race and politics with Baldwin, and then to see what Jimmy, it was a well done.
Yeah.
They did a good job with it to make the point that ultimately I
Yeah.
think you're making as well. Like it was like wow, wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow, 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 wow. And then to me, if I may, this assault on various forms of literacy has an effect on our political literacy, and why so many are willing to think that Kamala will be our savior. And that when she runs in 28 or whatever, this will be our chance to get back on track as a country.
Yeah, they're rolling out. She's on some speaking tour or whatnot with Cory Booker. And Cory Booker was like giving, I don't know, whatever the speech is, I'm paraphrasing parts of it, but like basically chastising voters for like, oh, this one issue. Oh, I like all these other things, but this one issue. But the one issue is genocide. We're not talking about where a grocery store gets constructed we're talking about slaughter. And to be real, Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, if they were both in Israel without their security, with nobody knowing who they were, they would get tortured because they would be mistaken for Palestinians.
If they were without their suits and their entourages.
Thank you. And I'm just like, how are you not? And Kamala Harris, like, see, being on the West Coast, because it's something I've been trying to like figure out. There was a video on Instagram, and this brother was from, I think, like somewhere like Brooklyn or somewhere in New York, and he had also lived in like, I don't know, Chicago, somewhere else with like a lot of Black people, and he moved to LA. He made this video, and he was talking about, he had like Issa Rae's Insecure in his head and stuff, and looking, and he said he had never lived in a place before where you have to look for Black people, like you have to try to find Black people, because that's what San Francisco is. Because on the West Coast where we are, we are in pockets on the West Coast. And I'm also going to plug this book again. I know people hear me in the chat. Palo Alto: A History of California Capitalism in the World is required reading. I'm just going to put that out there. But like the dynamics of the West Coast. See, I'm going to put this like a small tangent. Like this is what I call like the four pillars of control within the heart of empire. We have the bureaucratic, and which is Washington, D.C. We can all see it. We can focus on it. Something's wrong. Something's right. Want to get something done. We see D.C. There's the diplomatic end, which is the United Nations. They're located geographically in New York, where there are also a lot of Black people. There's a lot of just people, right, from all over. And then you have the propaganda arm, which is Hollywood, Southern California, right? Like that's the propaganda arm. And I remember even after like September 11th, it was like these people from Washington, they got in touch with studio heads and like whatever to propagandize us for the wars that they were about to enact. But then you have the money, the technology. Like I argue the United States is being run from San Francisco. And so it's not a coincidence that Gavin Newsom, who they're also gonna roll out on us as governor of California. I was in San Francisco when he was on the board of supervisors, became mayor. That whole mayor's race, like that was like a whole like tangent I don't have time to go into. But then also when Kamala Harris was out there, like San Francisco, all the fiber optic cable network that allows us to be on the internet, it comes into the United States in two places. The New York, or I've heard like the physical building is in New Jersey, but San Francisco, which is why you'll never have these like with the ice raids, what was going down in Minneapolis, Los Angeles, you saw they can't afford for something to happen in San Francisco because it will literally blind them. Because like that's their eyes and ears, right? Is that fiber optic cable network. And it's been in place. Richard Eads Harrison, and I think I linked it in one of the pieces. He was a cartographer, and he produced a whole bunch of maps for Empire, but like one of them was like showing the IT network that we have like right now that's driving the internet. But between Palo Alto, San Francisco, and Berkeley, because UC Berkeley gets like about, I think I read it was like a quarter of all defense contracts for the Defense Department or something like that. But you don't have the money happening, the tech, which is driving everything from San Francisco, because we're not paying attention to San Francisco. And I said that to say, because there's not a lot of Black people, like we're in pockets, Oakland, which is not San Francisco, that's a whole nother thing, Los Angeles, and maybe Long Beach. Like otherwise, like it's very sparsely populated. Like you actually have to look for Black people, and anybody living east of the Mississippi and in Texas, we've not really had that experience unless we're living in like some small white town somewhere. But the bulk of us, we've never had that experience of having to look for and seek out Black people. And so San Francisco becomes, between East Palo Alto, which Malcolm Harris does actually write about in that book, San Francisco, you have small isolated Black populations where in my mind, like you can roll out, experiment, and like the masses of Black people aren't really aware. And Kamala Harris coming from that environment is just a big gaslight, because even as the when she was the DA and I was working with students out there, she had something about like wanting to like prosecute parents for students being truant. And when she was AG, she actually, like her office pulled out this policy. The first person who like was charged was a black woman, a working class black woman. Her daughter had sickle cell, which is something that impacts black people specifically. And doing due diligence, the school knew why the child was absent. I think like Cherie Peebles or something like that was her name. And the school knew why the child was absent. So she didn't even do due diligence to let me make sure I'm not trick the girl, like prosecuting this. And I mean, like it took that woman, like she lost her job. She has, I mean, like when you're charged with a criminal something, like you don't just like, oh, okay, sorry, this is wrong and get out of it. So this is Kamala Harris, the environment she's coming from in San Francisco, but then also you can't like San Francisco's where like you can get elected as a black person, but you can't be elected as a black person being like advocating for the black community because there's just not like it's 7%. I think it's less than 7% black. The state of California is less than 7% black. A very heavily populated state. But in San Francisco, you can't. So she couldn't get elected as the DA, advocating for the very tiny black community that's there. And so gaslighting. So all of these black folk back east who don't understand like the concept of having to look for black people, like this guy was saying on his Instagram post. Because I was like, yes, this is something I've been trying to explain to people for years, and like they just don't understand because we just haven't had that experience. But she, yeah, like she's just not the
She's a
one.
mess.
It's just,
You know, first of all, you remind me, and again, I'll just salute to Glenn Ford. The first assignment I was sent on for Black Agenda Report in the early 2000s was to go to the National Press Club and get on record a question that Glenn crafted meant to expose Cory Booker as the what Martin Kilson was calling the Trojan horse of black politics. And in his campaign against Sharp James, he was promoting himself as this, again, like a mini Obama, the young, well, not mixed, but mixed presenting sometimes, you know, unthreatening, brilliant, new age, blah, 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 community organizer. That phrase lost all meaning. And yeah. And I admit at the time, I didn't know anything about any of them. I didn't know anything about Newark politics, and Cory wasn't a name. I was just following instructions and going down there being a good reporter, a good uninformed reporter. But and since then it's been proven correct. So to see him now running around again with Kamala, and having listened to her book, I did listen to her book where I mean, I'll at least say it's well done propaganda. I mean, they skillfully put together a version of herself and her political positioning that is clearly meant to prepare her to run again. I mean, it's bizarre. And then in there twice at least she says, you Palestinian, pro-Palestinian activists cost me an election.
and Kamala, like San Francisco is a testing ground for so much. Her election, I remember for DA, I can't remember the guy's name. Because we got Obama, say because of Kamala. When she ran for DA, like the identity politics and getting like because there was a white guy who came from like a progressive, like leftist, one of those radical, like as progressive, I guess, as you can be running for a district attorney, a prosecutor, but still, like some legitimate like leftists, and Terrence Hallinan, was that his name? I can't remember, but the identity, the machine, like it was a runoff between like three of them, and then it was going to be Terrence. I think Terrence Hallinan, like that name is coming up. If that's not him, whoever, like I'm sure it's online. But it was between her and him, like the third guy didn't place. And the machine came in with the identity politics behind Kamala Harris, who at that point didn't really have like political footing. And it was like, oh, this black woman, this old white man, even though this old white guy was like a fisticuffs, and it's like he had history on the progressive left, or as, like I say, as progressive left as you can be, trying to be a prosecutor, but still. And the machine came in behind her, and it was a sight to see. And like they're like, oh, this is a method, this works. Barack Obama. Because even like Gavin Newsom, wasn't that when he was running for mayor? Because he said, being from San Francisco, Gavin Newsom is who they're about to try to roll out on us. Also, for president, he's very dangerous. And I say that saying, like, even I remember him when he was a supervisor running for mayor. And again, that machine, because you have like those leftists on the ground in San Francisco. And there was this guy, I think Tom Amiano was his name. He was another supervisor. He did a write-in campaign because California was on paper ballots. And he placed. And so because of that, he had to have press attention. The media, corporate media had to cover him because it was him and Gavin Newsom. And every time he got on the camera, he was making common sense. He was talking about policies. He wasn't getting into anything. He got a write-in campaign, and then the machine came in and like push, and that's how we got Gavin Newsom. Because like, and so I mean, you saw that like a Republican, I don't think can ever get elected in San Francisco. San Francisco's centrist to like leftist. You still have like this leftist radical tendency on the ground there, but that obscures what the power structure is. And that power structure came in. I watched it for Kamala Harris and for Gavin Newsom. But yeah, you say we got Barack Obama because of the campaign for Kamala Harris when she was running for district attorney of San Francisco. I think it was like 2004. So yeah, like 4 years later, it's like, oh, this works.
So listen, because and this is my fault. I do need to wrap us up here, but this is my point though. You just did it again. The Chitimacha 3-step propaganda model. You showed us the producers of the nonsense around these candidates, and then you at least referred to the obscurantist process that where we could fill in the podcasts and the platforms and the news outlets and the whomever else is the celebrities that are rolled out, that part of that machinery you're talking about. That's the obscurantist process, all leading to this acceptance that we're gonna see a lot of people come get stuck on, starting with the midterms in a minute, and then this year, and then the national election in 28, where people are just going to be, and they're going to be telling us, Jared, accept that you have to vote for the lesser of an evil. Because why, Terry? This is 2028 is the most important election of our lifetime, as was the last one, as was the last one, as was the last one, and the last one. So next time we'll talk to you about your other plans for elections and other alternatives and parties, and next time. But this time we gotta accept. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say we already outlined the process, because I know the Chitimacha three-step propaganda model. So I'm not falling for it. I already got it. And it, and if I could find the drop, oh man, I love that. So listen, anything you want to say, to wrap us up, or concluding thoughts? And again, I'll remind everybody to check the show description for your work and link tree and all of that. What a unfortunate question. That is from Coming to America, the first Coming to America, Eddie Murphy playing one of many roles that he played in that film. And real quick, somebody mentions coming out to these tree-lined streets. Two things quickly. Yes, we do have clubs now. We have at least 2 clubs here in Columbia, Maryland, where I can see go-go, which is all I need. And we're no longer, I'm not going to refer to my city as a tree-lined streets anymore. Columbia, Maryland is now, has to be understood as the second largest city in Maryland. It is the second largest city in Maryland. So I am living in the second largest city in the fine state, blue state of Maryland.
Would that be that spatial deconcentration?
I got spatially deconcentrated in the mid 1970s. Yes. Nothing's wrong with the tree-lined streets. Nothing's wrong with them. Oh, shout out Dr. Winkler. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for coming out to Crushing Wheelchairs too. Dope. So yeah, I'm sorry. Let me give you a chance to say anything, and thank you very much again for doing this. This has been great, and definitely come back when your literacy piece is published.
Thank you. I will. Just thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, I never pictured myself like even being a writer or writing, but I felt like I had something to say. So yeah. I guess that's I don't have anything additional to add, but like read the work, engage the work. One of the reasons why also I wrote it is like they could serve as like political education sessions, like for people who don't have the time or the capacity to read a whole book. Maybe take the article, take like a couple of links out of it, discuss in a group. Like there's some video links, there's some links to other works, and just maybe like build that political education, because that's I think really the main reason why I wrote it. Trying to do something in my location with these Gen Xers and these boomers.
And these boomers, yes. Leah Boggs is in the chat. Salute to her and for bringing out. I was trying to come up with a joke because I was thinking, I felt like when I saw her and her husband last night, I was thinking, that I felt like he was living my life for a moment. Just following along. Just my wife says, "Show up, I'm here." Like a good husband, but thanks Leah for coming out last night to Crushing Wheelchairs. And folks, you can, I don't know where you can see it next. So what I would encourage folks is to check my channel or and for the Poor Magazine link tree and find out more, more about when the film is going to be available in your area, and maybe reach out to the filmmakers about hosting a screening. I'm sure they would love to work with you on that. And yeah. So yeah. And again, Terri, thank you very much. Chitimacha, this has been great. I can't wait to do this again. And folks, please also see her interview on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. If not others as well, but at least that one, because I very much intended for this to be a complement to that and not just a repeat or covering the same ground exactly, even though there was some overlap. That was the goal, so please check that out. And again, people, do all the things you can, like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, comment, do all the things, and as always, peace only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And I will see you next time with more.
And what did you sacrifice? Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, the set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy and defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Well, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, 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 everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.